I'm Tony Scott with bnetTV. We are here at Mobile World Congress 2012 in Barcelona, and I'm speaking with the Wireless Broadband Alliance's Shrikant Shenwai. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you so much. Nice meeting you.
Very nice meeting you as well, sir. So, for all the people out there in bnetTV land, tell me all about the Wireless Broadband Alliance and why it's important to be engaged.
Well, Wireless Broadband Alliance was started about 8 years back by large carriers, as the name suggests, to look at wireless broadband opportunities. More specifically focus on wireless broadband in the context of what Wi-Fi can facilitate. And that's what the operators who are founding members of the organization decided to look at. How to use Wi-Fi as part of the experience that the customer needs to be delivered in time to come for wireless broadband services.
So inevitably it was the birth of the offload.
Well, birth of the offload, to be candid, wasn't necessarily anticipated when we found it. But it happened, as we all know, and it's all here.
Absolutely.
And in fact, that's the biggest thing that we have been addressing over the last couple of years. And in fact, we have made great progress in that area through a program that we call as Next Generation Hotspot program. And that program essentially looks at how do you make Wi-Fi as easy to use as a cellular experience. You have a device, which of course now has both Wi-Fi and cellular. You open the device, it connects. You don't have to worry about authentication, finding a network, security issues, all those things. It works. And that's really what Next Generation Hotspot program is trying to do for.
And inevitably in transport as well. LTE is being deployed in multiple markets. The idea of offloading into Wi-Fi and putting it back into transport, I mean, is a very hot topic during the show.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, this whole program looks at an operator perspective on how you look at end-to-end service delivery capability within the home environment, which is where the offload comes in, but also across the operators in terms of interworking and roaming as well. And a lot of it goes back into the backhaul and into the core networks, and how do you facilitate that? So those are the sort of opportunity challenges we are looking at this point of time.
So I actually had a great chance to have a wonderful conversation with the founder of Marvell today, Wailing Day, and we were talking about use cases for connected home devices. Right. So the regular router being the Wi-Fi institute within the home for all connected devices is it's the standard now, right? What do you mean you don't have a router at home? It would be very strange. Okay, I mean, there's a certain level of penetration that still needs to happen, but it's almost a standard. That being said, Marvell is using NFC as part of the SSID Connect, as opposed to WAP or another type of authentication method. My point that I'm trying to come around to is that with a lot of the connected home devices, the Wi-Fi becomes a really important access point within the broadband chain.
Right.
And I want you to comment on what the Broadband Alliance is doing to make sure that the standards and policies and compliance is making sure that the connections are easy for the end consumer to have.
Well, that's a great question. In
That's
fact,
a long way around it, but that's, yeah.
Right, and there are different ways to do what you just talked about in terms of giving that connectivity for a home environment. The Wireless Broadband Alliance is really focused more, and again, Wi-Fi is being used in different areas. Residential being clearly one of them, which is where we spend 70 to 80% of our time by certain numbers that we see around here. WBA looks at issues in terms of public Wi-Fi access for public carriers. But the good news is a lot of public carriers do have their customers at home, and they are at times integrated carriers with either a broadband network or a cable network behind it. So the question is, how do you then make it easier for customers to connect and stay connected and get these side of content and services that they need to be accessing even when they're at home? So from a technical standpoint point of view, what we're doing is there are several key elements which will make it easy for the devices to stay connected to the Wi-Fi network, and of course through that to the broadband network at the back end, using certain standardized things like A2.1x, which is really to make sure the security is taken care of, A2.11u, which is to make sure the networks are discoverable and you are able to connect them with certain ease in the sense that you don't need to understand how to connect. And then lastly but not least is the EAP method, which is essentially all about how do I make sure my credentials are being passed on to the network, identifying precisely who am I, whether I'm allowed to use this device, and it's me, I'm supposed to get this service
Your
today.
ID carries with you the entire
Right. So those are the sort of capabilities which would be relevant regardless of whether you're at home or outside. Having said that, like I said, the forum is more focused on public or network operators and what they need to do and how we can provide the enabling technologies. Right.
Okay, I'm gonna go. Beyond the home now, obviously, and we're gonna go out into the core. And when we were at Broadband World Forum, this past year, we saw a lot of different types of solutions that were managing the core, the edge, the throughput to make sure that the user experience was seamless. And that really, at the end of the day, is the most important thing because the infrastructure, capex and opex costs are always going to be covered by ARPU, right? The average revenue per user. That at the end of the day, those are the people who are putting up the money so that the infrastructure can be put into place, right? Okay. The problem is, we all talk about fast speeds, but we're not really seeing fast speeds to the extent that we're talking about them. You and I can sit here and say, well, there's software and hardware that's being put into place that's going to be able to, on a enterprise level, manage a throughput of, 200 gig, just to use a number, 2 gig, whatever it's going to be. I, as the end consumer, which is paying my wireless bill, which is the OPEX and CAPEX coverage for the the carrier who's putting in the infrastructure, I'm not getting that. I'm not getting a throughput. My calls probably aren't being dropped as much, but my data connection can be a little bit slow. Now, in an arena where you've got 60,000 folks using heavy duty users, for sure, that's fair. I totally get that. But with more and more connected devices coming online at a very rapid pace, is the infrastructure going to be able to keep up with the demand? The more food you put on the table, the more people they're going to put it on their plates.
That's an interesting question, and I think it's a question that really has been one of the biggest challenges for carriers in general. And I think that's the reason we are now talking about is the integration of different technologies and looking at how do I get my customer and help him stay connected regardless of what network is available with the right capacities and in a position to deliver the right experience at a given location. Would that solve problem today, tomorrow, in what operator environment, how that will be dealt with? There's so many variables there, so many moving parts there, right?
Absolutely.
But at the same
The end consumer doesn't understand that there's a lot of variables, though, and no offense, don't care.
I understand, and I think you and me are consumers as well, right?
Sure.
So we also understand that if you put more cars on the road than the road has been built for,
Right.
we're going to get choked.
Right.
And if you like a particular stretch of road where everyone wants to go at the same time, it'll get choked.
But you'll still get mad at the fact that you.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Fair enough. And I think that's where it's a service provider's job to make sure that you anticipate where the traffic is going to happen and then intelligently plan for those traffics to be taken care of. And that involves making sure that you have integrated networks together in a right way, you provision right capacities for right type of usage patterns in right locations. And on top of that, I think there's a technology evolution path that's happening. That should help. That's already helping in some ways.
Okay. So, I want to stop there just for a second because the reason why I asked the questions in the order that I asked them, which we sort of gone sort of a roundabout way from the home back into the core, but the edge, into the user and the experience of the person who's paying for it at the end of the day, the alliance is there so that it's a forum for the togetherness. Let's go solve the problem together. Yes. So I want you to comment on one of the reasons on why it's important for everybody, for all of the carrier, get involved. Let's get the broadband carriers involved. Get in here. Let's solve the problems together.
Absolutely, and it's more than the carriers. You have to have the right ecosystem players, number one, which means the carriers, the infrastructure vendors, the device vendors, and probably the platform providers with the operating systems and so on and so forth. Why? Because it works at different layers on what problems you need to solve for connectivity and so on and so forth. And those are the areas where, again, a forum like ours has been putting the right ecosystem partners together. We just finished a trial called Next Generation Hotspot Trial. And that trial essentially was getting all these key players, the large carriers from mobile space, from fixed space, the infrastructure vendors like the Cisco's of this world, Ruckus, Bel Air, those sort of companies, also the device vendors like Samsung and so on and so forth, got them all together to make sure that we are testing the technologies and the viability of the technologies in a more comprehensive environment. So those are sort of things which we are doing now. But besides that, I think it's also important that you need to look at how the standardization needs to happen when it is within or across certain domains. So for instance, Wi-Fi is not just a Wi-Fi issue. We are here because the GSM folks are as worried about or as excited about Wi-Fi as everyone else is. So of course, how do you make sure that the right forums are engaged, not just the ecosystem vendors and operators, the right forums are working together. The standardization bodies are doing their bit as well. And those are again things in terms of Wi-Fi and the public Wi-Fi space. WBA makes sure we engage the right people. And that's what we've been doing.
I can very much appreciate where you're coming from, and I want to commend you on that last bit of statement there, because that really kind of summed up the idea that we have, as an ecosystem, as long-term players and people in this particular industry, have been doing a lot of talking for a long period of time, for sure. But all of the things that we have talked about have now come to fruition. We now have an ecosystem that's evolving at a level, at a rapid pace. These are good problems to have. They're good problems to have. And these are where the alliances and forums are going to be extremely beneficial. And I want you to end this interview off with why membership in your alliance has its privileges.
Well, it has privileges and it has, I think, clearly imperatives for a lot of companies, especially the operators in particular. Why? A lot of these technology issues, and you can get equipments coming to you with certain vendors providing certain things, but you need to make sure that you're harmonizing the business glue part, which the operators have to make sure is in place. And that includes things like contracts, that includes things like the best practices of how the services are delivered. That also requires you to make sure that you have essentially done the right things together. And that's what in the Wi-Fi context, in the public Wi-Fi space, WB as a forum provides. It provides the people to come together, able to come together, get the right things worked out and implement them, accelerated way so that you can go to the market and do the business that you need to do.
You've summed it up very nicely, Shrikant. Thank you very much for taking the opportunity to speak with us today at Mobile World Congress. I hope we get a chance for an update again in the future. And I think that's probably going to happen.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us here. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. I've been speaking with Shrikant Shenwai of the Wireless Broadband Alliance here at the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona 2012. I'm Tony Sklar with bnetTV.